All right, let's talk about a skill that is so important, but for some reason is almost never actually taught. How to really read a research paper without losing your mind.
So let me just ask you this. Have you ever found yourself staring at some super dense academic paper, you read the same paragraph over and over and nothing? You're still totally lost? Well, what if I told you there's a much better way to do it?
Yeah, because for most of us, that's the reality. We start at word 1, and we just try to power through to the very end. And honestly, it's a recipe for disaster. It leads to hours of wasted time and just a ton of frustration. But it really doesn't have to be like that.
See, the real issue here is that we're all kind of drowning in this sea of papers. It doesn't matter if you're a student, a professional researcher, or you're just trying to stay on top of your field, the sheer volume of information coming at you can feel completely overwhelming.
And this points to a pretty big paradox, right? Reading technical work is an absolutely critical skill in so many fields, but it's something we're all just expected to figure out on our own. It's kind of like being told to go build a house without anyone ever showing you how to swing a hammer.
So what's the secret? What's the solution? Well, it's a really elegant and powerful method from researcher Eskashev, and it's called the 3-pass approach.
The core idea is super simple, but it's also a total game changer. Instead of one long, painful reading session, you tackle the paper in up to 3 separate, distinct passes. Each pass has its own specific goal, and you build your understanding layer by layer.
And here they are. First, the scan, then the read, and finally, the deep dive. You can think of it like this. First, you fly over a city to see the layout. Then you walk its mean streets to get a feel for it. And only then do you start exploring every little side street and alley.
Okay, let's break down how this actually works, starting with Pass 1, the quick scan. I want you to think of this as your quick reconnaissance mission.
Seriously, this first pass should only take you about 5 to 10 minutes. That's it. The goal here is not to understand everything. The goal is to figure out if this paper is even worth your precious time in the first place.
This is all about being strategic. You're hitting the highlights. The title and abstract tell you the what. The section headings give you the structure, the roadmap. The conclusions give you the big payoff. And glancing at the references, that tells you who the authors are talking to and building on. After just 10 minutes, you should be able to answer these 5 C's. 1. Category. What kind of paper is this? 2. Context. Where does it fit in the bigger conversation? 3. Correctness. Do their assumptions seem reasonable on the surface? 4. Contributions. What's the big new idea here? And 5. Clarity. Is this thing actually well written? If you can answer those, you're golden. You can now decide, do I read on or do I move on?
Okay, so let's say you've decided the paper is relevant. Now we move on to the second pass, where we start to really grasp the content.
This pass is going to take you about an hour. You're putting in more time now because you're actually aiming for a solid understanding of the paper's main arguments and the evidence they're using to back them up.
So here, you're reading much more carefully, but, and this is super important, you still get to ignore the really dense mathematical proofs or the super nitty-gritty details. Instead, you want to focus your energy on the figures, the diagrams, the graphs. Why? Because that's often where the real story is. Are the axes labeled properly? Are there error bars? This is where you can start to tell the difference between really solid work and something that's a bit sloppy.
And look, this whole strategy is incredibly important. Keshev makes this fantastic point for anyone who writes papers. Most reviewers are only going to give your paper that quick first pass. So if they can't get the main idea in about 5 minutes, it's probably getting rejected. It just goes to show you how powerful that initial scan really is.
And now for the final and most intense stage, Pass 3, the deep dive. This is where you go from just understanding a paper to truly, deeply mastering it.
The third pass, it requires a complete shift in your mindset. You are no longer a passive reader. Your goal is to actively, in your own mind, try to re-implement the paper. You're thinking through all the logic as if you were the one creating it from scratch.
Think of it like a forensic analysis. You challenge every single assumption they make. You compare the version you're building in your head to what the author actually wrote, and you see where they differ. This is the process that reveals the paper's true innovations, its hidden assumptions, and maybe even its flaws. This is the level of understanding you need if you're going to be a peer reviewer or if you plan to build your own research directly on top of this work.
So, we've walked through the 3 passes one by one, but their real power, their magic, comes from how they all work together as a complete system.
And this table really sums it up perfectly, doesn't it? Pass 1 is your filter. Is this paper actually for you? Pass 2 is all about comprehension. Could you explain the key points to a colleague? And Pass 3, that's for mastery. Could you reconstruct the entire argument from memory?
What's amazing is that this method also scales up beautifully. Let's say you need to get up to speed on a whole new field. You don't just read 50 papers from start to finish. That would take forever. Instead, you use this approach strategically. You do a first pass on a handful of recent papers, you use their citations to find the most important researchers and the foundational work, and then you can zero in on the top conferences. It's a systematic way to map out an entire body of knowledge.
When you get right down to it, what we're talking about here is so much bigger than just a reading technique. This is really a framework for how to approach any complex information, how to break it down, and how to absorb it efficiently. It's a tool for learning how to learn.
So, now that you're armed with this method, the only question left to ask is, what complex topic, what challenging paper, what new field are you going to choose to understand next?